Hello and welcome back to Web Components in Space. So, we've been trying to build a pose tracking component or a set of components because we want to track your body, your face, your hands, everything. And Tensorflow.js seems like the perfect solution to do this in our web browser. So, with this in mind, in the last segment, we took a look at Tensorflow.js. We looked at some of the demos. We looked at some of their GitHub page write-ups. But we were kind of doing it aimlessly. So I think let's get some direction. Let's talk to Jason Mays from Google. He's a developer advocate on the TensorFlow.js team. So this is great. I steered our space lab right over into orbit over San Francisco. So let's talk to him now. Hey, Jason, welcome. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. You've had a busy summer. And when we were trying to connect, you were off touring, I think, Europe, and you were in a jetpack somehow.
Yes.
What are those combined? Like, did you fly it on stage in a jetpack and talk about TensorFlow?
So back in the good old days, I wanted to be a pilot in the Royal Air Force over in England. I'm from England originally, and for various reasons that didn't work out. So now flying is my hobby essentially, and my personal mission in life is to kind of do all the forms of flying that matter to me. So I've tried doing it flying a helicopter, an airplane, glider, hang gliding, paragliding, a hot air balloon. I've also walked on the wings of airplanes, and just recently I've learned to fly like Iron Man with a real life jet engine strapped to my arms and back. It's I'm getting through things I never thought would be possible in my lifetime, but we're getting there. I think the only thing left now is space. So hopefully I can join you in your spaceship one day. That'd be great.
That'd be great. Be here right now.
Last thing on my list.
So I assume when you walked in the wing of the plane was in the air, correct?
It was flying at the time, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a great YouTube video for those interested. Just search my name on YouTube and wing walking and you'll find it.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. This was around the same time you were doing a lot of conferences, correct?
Yes. So I was down in London for presenting at a few conferences and meetups over there and talking to some universities which are potentially interested in getting TensorFlow.js into their syllabus and all that kind of fun stuff.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes into what is your day-to-day life like as a developer advocate? I've never been one. I've actually applied for a few jobs. As a developer advocate, never really worked out, and I was always curious, what would I do as a developer advocate? Can you tell me?
That's a great question. Essentially, it's a software engineer who also enjoys going around speaking to people is like the TLDR.
Yeah. Okay.
So my role is to be this kind of interface between the product team and the real world, and also the real world back to the product team to help shape the future of the product. So I'm kind of this person who gets the lay of the land when speaking to people externally to know what the problems are, actually being on the front lines of everybody and feeding that information back to make a better product. But also when new features are coming out, I'm one of the first people to learn them, make sure it's easy to use, provide tutorials, courses on edX, that kind of stuff, whatever it might be. Maybe even write a book one day. That's my longer term goal, of course. And put all that information in a way that people can get inspired by and utilize. So when I first joined the team, when I was learning about all this stuff, I tried to take on a theme of superpowers. So I was like, how many superpowers from the sci-fi movies could I recreate with machine learning in some shape or form? And the first thing I created was an invisibility cloak, for example. And that actually got picked up by the media and did its rounds.
I actually remember that separately. I didn't know that was you.
On as a privacy tool, which was not my intention at all. But it went off on a whole world tour on that one. So at one point, if you searched my name, it came up with Invisibility Man or something like this, rather than actually my face. So, things that have like trying to make things that inspire people. But people are like, oh, how did he actually pull that off in JavaScript of all things as well? Like I thought JavaScript was slow. Actually, no, it's not. Maybe back in the 90s it was, but with the new V8 engine, JavaScript's faster than Python. So I think I want to try and educate people how they can use the benefits of JavaScript, especially for machine learning on the web, to do what they need at scale and in production, especially not just for research and one-off research projects, but how do you scale this for everyone to use and enjoy, no matter if you're a musician, an artist, or whatever background you might be from. Everyone now has the chance to use machine learning in their projects. And I hope that being a developer advocate, or as they say at Google, developer relations engineer, we like to be slightly different over time, is the way I can kind of contribute back to society there, I guess. So,
awesome. Yeah. And that actually brings up a good point too. I'm not sure, did we ever say what your title was? Because I've been calling you lead developer advocate for
Yes.
TensorFlow.js.
So
Correct?
it's slightly changed recently. So
Okay.
that was my old title. I'm now lead for WebML, essentially within
Okay.
developer relations
Okay.
engineering at Google. So obviously there's TensorFlow.js, which we are talking about today, but
Mhm.
there's other teams that are using the web stack to do machine learning. So WebAssembly, for example, without
Right.
using the TensorFlow.js API, that is now coming under my remit a little bit as well. So
Okay.
just taking on the broadest WebML scope. So anything on
Mhm.
the client side in JavaScript, or even like Node.js as well, is fine. So
Okay.
yeah, that's growing steadily, and it just shows that this stuff is being taken more seriously these days. We're now growing in that capacity. There's different types of WebML now available, just not just TensorFlow.js, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of interesting to see too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so when we were talking about when you were previewing the questions I was going to ask you, you corrected me on one of these questions, and I basically made the distinction like TensorFlow.js is a subset of
Yeah.
TensorFlow proper, the TensorFlow
Right.
property. You
Yeah.
corrected me on that, and I think it's because I have a habit of thinking. If you have a project like the JS version is kind of a second-class citizen,
Right.
and I thought you correcting me was amazing. It says a lot because it's not a second-class citizen. What
Right.
is
Yeah.
what is kind of the dynamic? Like what are the
Oh,
different
yeah,
teams
that's a
around
really
that?
good question. Something close to my heart. When I first started this role, there was a lot of bias from academia who are very Python based, and nothing wrong with using Python. I want to be very clear that I'm not saying you must use JS. But use the right tool for the job at the right time. But there is an inherent bias within research and academia to use Python because that's what they're taught at university.
Mhm.
But if you look at the stats of the languages, like Python's not the most efficient language to use. And if you look at our Node.js stack, for example, on the back end, if you've got a lot of pre and post processing, the Node.js version of TensorFlow is faster because of a just-in-time compiler of JavaScript, up to 2 times faster. So there's a famous company called Hugging Face that do natural language processing models, and they
Mhm.
converted their model from Python to Node. So all the only thing they changed was the pre and post processing, rewriting that in Node,
Okay.
and that gave them a 2 times performance boost. And
Wow.
similarly, LinkedIn now use TensorFlow.js, not
Mhm.
TensorFlow Python, in their production environment at scale. So when you're loading a LinkedIn page on your mobile phone, I think it's called LinkedIn Lite, those pages are optimized in the moment to deliver the best imagery and things like this on the web page based on your device. And that's all done using TensorFlow.js, and because it's faster, and that allows them to save a lot of money, which they would otherwise, over billions of impressions, be losing if they weren't using TensorFlow.js.
Yeah. I mean, speaking
Yeah.
of the cool things you can build, I wanted to ask you about some of the cool things you could build. I mean, I've been looking at like pose capture, and that's super cool. But other than, I mean, I can download some code and run the code.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I know about TensorFlow.
Yeah.
If I want to get more, in depth into TensorFlow and really learn it, like what is it? What's a good example of a hello world application in TensorFlow?
The answer would be object detection is probably the hello world
Mm.
of machine learning, in my personal opinion. It's very easy to do these days. It's almost a solved problem. You can
Mhm.
use an existing model and use transfer learning to take the existing knowledge that it's learnt and apply it to a similar but different domain. So if I've got a model that understands how to recognize cats and dogs,
Mhm.
in order to do that, it needs to understand lots of different features like different shapes and patterns and textures, and those things it's learned can then be used to recognize, I don't know, this microphone that you see here, for
Mhm.
example,
Yep.
just by retraining the top layers and not having to retrain the whole stack, which means you can do it in 30 seconds instead of a week of training with lots of data. And you need like 30 images instead of like 3,000 or something. So, it's very powerful stuff. And I think, yeah, image recognition is like the easiest low-hanging fruit hello world you can do. And just to be clear here, the difference between object recognition and image recognition is
Mhm.
that for object recognition, you know the bounding box for the item you're trying to find. And because of that, you know where you can localize it in the image. And you also know how many. Image recognition, which is like the simpler version of this, is essentially, there's a dog in the image, but you don't know how many or where.
Okay, yeah.
It just says there's probably a dog in the image somewhere. Okay.
Okay.
So image recognition, to clarify, is probably the hello world. Object recognition is like one step further, I guess, so the 102. But yeah, it's very powerful, and you can do that very easily. In fact, if you're willing, I can show you right now a very quick demo of TensorFlow.js in action to do object
Please
recognition.
go
Yeah,
for
okay.
it.
So there's a website called Teachable Machine, and it's coded completely in JavaScript. So everything you see here is actually running in the browser in JS after the initial page load. So you click on Get Started, and you're going to see 3 projects. One for image recognition, one for audio recognition, and one for pose recognition. Of course, there's other things you can do in machine learning, but these are the 3 that we've just made for you that you can use very easily. So you click on Image to select Standard Image Model. And then you've got this nice interface. You got on the left-hand side the classes of things you want to recognize. So let's give this a new name. So call this one Jason. And class 2, we can do my hands. So hands. If you wanted to recognize more things, you can add class and do more things if you wish later on. What we're going to do is enable access to the webcam. And once this loads, let me open up my webcam visor there. There I am. There's Jason. And we're going to click on hold to record and gather some samples of my face. Okay, I'm going to move my face around to get some variety as well, because machine learning needs some variety. About 30, 40 images there. Boom, there we go. There's lots of images of my face. Now for the hands, I'm going to do exactly the same thing and get roughly the same number of images. That's important. Otherwise, it'll be biased towards one class or the other. Because if you think about it, if you have 100 Jasons and only 1 hand, if it just predicted Jason all the time, it would be 99% correct, which is like, oh, great result. So it can do that. So you're going to be avoiding bias. So same thing with my hand, get roughly the same at 40 images. There we go, 41, that's close enough. I'm going to hit train model. And now we're going to take a model called MobileNet. We're going to chop off the top layers and retrain those top layers to recognize Jasons and hands instead of the 1,000 objects it recognized before. And boom, in under 30 seconds in JavaScript, we've managed to train that model. And you see Jason recognized of 100% on the right-hand side here. And if I put my hand into view, it says hand, Jason, hand. And look at that, real-time performance in the browser. We managed to make a custom model in under 30 seconds live here today. And if that's good enough for your demo, you can imagine, like, if I hold my hand up, you can then make the door open or whatever you want, connect it to a Raspberry Pi. There's possibilities are endless. You click on export model, click on download. You can then download the model.json files you need, which is the train model itself. You can host it on the website, and then you can use the code below to then load that saved model and then add your own user interface and do whatever you want. Maybe turn it into a web component, and boom, you've got something that everyone else can then use. And it's as easy as that. So that's why I like JavaScript. Let me stop sharing my screen. So yeah, that's why I like JavaScript. In just a few minutes, we're able to make something that you can share, wrap up in a web component, or add a Raspberry Pi to it to control something physical in the world. A lot of JS developers forget they can connect to Raspberry Pis with Node.js, for example. And it's very easy to use WebSockets to then stream data to that and then control a servo or whatever you want, right? So lots of potential here. Yeah.
So I am actually surprised by this response because this does not feel like a Hello World example, but you just proved it is.
Exactly.
I was in my mind, I was just thinking like you'd train some, an array of numbers and recognize an array of numbers, like, and it doesn't really do anything that useful, but this is easy and useful. So that's awesome.
Maybe in Python, you would have to do that. Yeah, and that's command line output. And making a user interface in Python is a lot more involved than, say, JS.
Right.
But yeah, with the web, like once someone's got that thing solved, they can just reuse that very easily and make a really nice UX like that.
So let's jump to the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, this is not going to be a Hello World application. I don't know if TensorFlow is capable of it, but you see things in the news today about like GPT-3. It like creates song lyrics and stories and blogs. And there's also DALL-E and Midjourney that's creating images from text. And I'm pretty sure that, these things aren't available to people like me to run on my local machine because it's such a massive amount of computing power.
Huge models, you need a lot of money to run those.
So does TensorFlow kind of touch these areas at all? Like, is there anything that you're doing on TensorFlow that is trying to approach this and let people like me run it?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these models are built around the TensorFlow stack as well. Like, TensorFlow generally. If you talk about TensorFlow.js specifically, then we do have models that are like GANs, generative models, to turn your photo into an anime character, for example, or something like that. That's possible. We even got a fun website called Tone Transfer, which is by the Magenta team at Google. And they use TensorFlow.js in the browser so that you can sing into your microphone or talk into your microphone, and then it will match the tone and turn you into a musical instrument of your choice, like a violin or a trumpet. So now anyone can play a musical instrument using their voice, which is really cool. And it sounds pretty realistic. It doesn't sound crap or anything. It's actually pretty realistic. You've got creative applications. You've got the more serious stuff. We've got people doing 3D MRI brain segmentation using TensorFlow.js in the browser. And that's a real big thing because of privacy. The reason they don't use cloud is because they want to keep that MRI data local in the doctor's office and not going to some random country or wherever it is that they might be located, they can be sure the privacy is maintained for the patient. So we're seeing a lot of interest in healthcare, fitness, sports using TensorFlow.js. In fact, one really good use case for us is a company called Include Health. And they use our pose estimation model to do remote physiotherapy at scale. So using a regular webcam, we can get medical grade estimations of your range of motion for your joints and things like this, and monitor the progress over time. And then from the comfort of your home, which is particularly important in these COVID times we've been living in, people could get accurate reports that their doctors could then use to analyze their range of motions and things like that. So
cool. Yeah, you brought up Magenta, and it just reminded me. So I've been trying to get back into music, but I am not a drummer, and that's one area I'm really weak in. And there's a tool for Ableton by the Magenta team that lets you like analyze MIDI and pull the drum tracks out and compose a unique drum track in the style. And I've been playing around. That has been really cool, and it's been helpful just because I'm hopeless at doing drums. So that's
yeah, some of the generative stuff there has been really cool. There's a company called Moobert that I sometimes like to listen to, and they are really high quality music generation. They use music loops, but they then combine them using AI to make really original tracks. But honestly, they're as good as a DJ as far as I'm concerned. They sound great to me. I'll have it as background music sometimes. I can't tell the difference.
So I want to let you go soon, but I do have one more question. We're talking about the web here, and there's so many flavors, like so many frameworks, so many different outputs on the web. How do you handle that? Like you're creating things for people and you're teaching people how to do things. You probably have the worst job out of all the developer advocates because you're just talking about JavaScript, but and now Wasm as well, of course. But like you have so many different targets. Like how do you handle them all? Like people want things in their framework or their technology.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's impossible for one person to cover everything, and we are slowly growing, which is good. I've got now another partner in crime on the developer advocacy side on my team. So the way I deal with that is that I'm very purist vanilla JS guy. If you want to use React or Angular or Clojure, whatever your framework of choice is, feel free. I don't care. But everyone, if you're a JavaScript developer, understands vanilla JS, but not everyone will understand React. If you're an Angular person and you've got an example in React, good luck porting that over. But if it's an example in JS, you can add your React wrapper around it and do what you need. So all of my examples will always be in vanilla JS. I might partner with the Angular or React teams from time to time if they're passionate about showing ML in that space. That's fine. But I myself will only show examples in pure vanilla JS.
This question kind of comes from a critique I've had, which is I've had a hard time using just native ES modules and importing. I've gotten some great responses on the GitHub issue for that. So I am cool. I know it sounds like it's in the works, and when I told you about it, you were like, I'm on it. So this is great. I mean, this is any software project. I feel like it comes from a place like of using like Webpack is king these days, or other front end tooling. And I think the web component community is trying to like, wean themselves off of complicated front end tooling like that. And that's kind of the place where my, how do you deal with all these development environments questions come from.
I see in my line of work right now, I see two types of JS developer. There's the ones that just want a script import to use on a front end page and move really fast. And then there's the ones who are building stuff via NPM or something and making a bundle and then deploying that bundle in the front end at the end with their own build systems, right? So there's two flavors of developer there. I'm probably more biased towards just import a script and be doing it just to showing you how to use the darn thing. But yeah, if you do find any issues with the build process that's not working with your build system, feel free to submit a bug on the TensorFlow.js GitHub repository. We're open source and we do take any bugs seriously. So if there's enough people affected by it, we are a small team, so we can't fix everything straight away. But if it's a big enough issue that's affecting enough people, then of course we can like look into making that actually work with what's popular right now.
Well, I want to let you go. I don't want to take up any more time. I want to thank you for coming on Web Components in Space. Do you have, I mean, you don't have to have any final words, but if you have any final words, you're welcome to share.
You have one final thing. So if you are interested in TensorFlow.js, I've made a brand new, completely free course over on edX that will take you from zero to hero in the world of web-based machine learning. All you need to know is JavaScript. No background in machine learning is required. And if you go to goo.gle/web learn-TFJS, you'll get to the course, or just search for Tensorflow.js on edX and you'll find me on there. But it's completely free. Take you about 5 weeks maybe to get through the course. So allow some time. There's some interesting exercises, but you'll go from complete zero to understanding like how machine learning works. What is the difference between AI, machine learning, deep learning? Everyone uses these words, but what's the difference between these terminologies and all this kind of stuff? It starts off nice and simple like that and goes straight into how to be productive, making your own models, transferring stuff from Python to the JS world. All that kind of stuff is covered. So
Cool.
see you over there, and thank you for listening to me today.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us.